Hello and welcome back to the Contested Realm. My name's Jesse Meulman-Marshall. Today we've got an exciting matchup between the Enchantress and the Geomancer. And Jared's starting off here with an Earth Sight into a Rubble, so making immediate use of that Geomancer's ability as you'd expect. So Geomancer here, obviously an avatar that can be pretty strong out of the gates. It gets a lot of the advantage from its avatar ability early in the game, from being able to play sites from the top of the atlas without having to draw them. So having the option to basically draw spells every turn for the first few turns and still hit all of those site drops. David is starting off with the Philosopher's Stone on the Enchantress, and Geomancer then replying with another Foot Soldier off another Earth site here. And Jared's already used the ability from the Geomancer to play that second Earth site, so already basically at +1 cards. And David are now having a think about what he's going to do about that Foot Soldier that is going to be threatening some damage next turn. So playing straight into the middle site, not too worried about getting hit by a pesky Foot Soldier. And I can see as I said, a Grandmaster Wizard still in David's hand there. And I think there was either a Thunderstorm or a Lightning Bolt as well. I didn't quite catch that, but it looked like some kind of lightning action going on there in hand. So the Foot Soldier does come in and gets 1 damage from David. And then the other Foot Soldier does move up behind. No, it actually stays back on the starting side. So Jared thinking about moving up, but then electing to actually stay behind. So Holy Ground coming down. No damage yet on Jared's avatar, so no heal from the Holy Ground, and then straight into an Autumn Unicorn. Then, yes, so I think I can see a Lightning Bolt, and what else is there in David's hand? An Atlantean Fate, possibly 2 Lightning Bolts here actually, which is kind of unusual for an Enchantress deck. You'd expect it to be Thunderstorms only. Possibly using those Lightning Bolts as finishers. And we are actually seeing the double Lightning Bolt coming down to take out the Autumn Unicorn. So a 2-for-1 there for Jared. You wouldn't be too upset, I don't think, being in Jared's seat, seeing 2 cards come down from your opponent, and 2 cards which can be really potent finishers, although of course Enchantress doesn't necessarily have too much issue finishing off the game. And then the Autumn Unicorn going down, but that's not too bad from Jared's perspective. So Jared is on a Roots of Yggdrasil version of Geomancer here, one that's threatening to blow up the whole board and then use Geomancer's ability again to keep gaining advantage. So really intelligent use of the card pool, I think, and the synergy between Geomancer and Rubble, and the fact that Roots of Yggdrasil also creates Rubble. Jared creating a deck here that has these early aggressive minions like Autumn Unicorn, and of course just the Foot Soldiers off the villagers that are chipping away at David's life total, demanding some attention from David's hand there with 2 spells to take out the 1 Autumn Unicorn, but then still that option, unlike a lot of other aggro decks, to come back with a reset of the board off the Roots of Yggdrasil and then use that Geomancer's card advantage all over again. So David is basically going to have to exploit this window in the middle of the game here before the Roots of Yggdrasil gets found, but after David's mana gets online, in order to be able to cast enough spells and do enough damage to Jared before potentially losing everything to the Roots. So David are going up to 1, 2, 3 for 5 mana plus the stone, enabling him to cast the Grandmaster Wizard and dig for some more spells. A Root Spider also coming down last turn on Jared's side of the board. So the Grandmaster Wizard is not going to be doing a whole lot now, but it's obviously done its job already. Drawn the Enchantress 3 spells. It's not in a position where it's going to be launching any wildfires into enemy territory, for example, using its spellcaster ability, because Davida has played it off to the side and in a sort of defensive position. But it is going to be something that Davida can use later on in the game to block or do those sorts of things as well. I apologize a little bit for the camera shake that's going on in this recording. We were playing on different tables to usual because we were set up for the championship, and this particular table just was a little bit less steady than what we would have liked. But hopefully the gameplay is still perfectly visible to you, which it looks pretty good to me. We've got the Geomancer tapping here, and Jared just thinking carefully. So as the Geomancer player, you always need to be careful exactly where you're placing your sites and where your rubble is going to end up, because all of those decisions can cause some flow-on impacts, and really it does basically there's more decisions for the Geomancer to make using that player side ability than what most other avatars have. And of course, as we know, the placement of sites in and of itself can just be extremely crucial. But when you've also got the timing and the creation of the rubble, and then the Geomancer wanting to use that rubble as expeditiously and efficiently as possible, it creates just another layer of thinking time as well. So the Atlas Wanderer is coming down. Bedrock, of course, which is down there on Davida's side of the board, but played by Jared, is one that can't be moved. So the Atlas Wanderer is just going to be where it is, effectively, but has switched places with the Root Spider to bring the Root Spider back into the middle of the board. Or rather, I think the Root Spider actually just moved across. I think the Atlas Wanderer was played, onto the crossroads, which didn't actually move because it attempted to move with the Bedrock. I think that's what happened there. It's a little bit hard to tell. So we've got the Poison Nova coming in here off Davide, which is going to cost 4 mana. And then that's going to kill both the Root Spider and the Atlas Wanderers. So that was a well-timed removal spell, because of course Atlas Wanderers, aside from its ability to do a range of things in Jared's deck, including, rescue a Roots of Yggdrasil that's been disabled by an Atlantean Fate or by a Smokestacks of Nyack. It's also just a 5-power minion, which is threatening immediate damage. So Davide was under a little bit of pressure to try and get rid of that, plus the Root Spider that was threatening a couple of damage as well. I think actually last turn the Root Spider had attacked across, so chipping away at Davide's life total there. And this turn, again, after casting the Poison over Davide past, and now Jared is just attacking again with the Foot Soldiers. So those Foot Soldiers off the villagers just really chipping away at Davide's life total. And it means we're now sitting at 20 for Jared and 0 to Davide. Davide spends a lot of resources between the 2 Lightning Bolts and the Poison Nova dealing with Jared's threats. Now the question is, can Jared use all of the additional card advantage that he's gathered from the Geomancer's ability up to this point by playing those sites out without having to spend additional Atlas draws? Can he use that card advantage to generate some ongoing advantage in the game? So one way that he's going to do that is through the Roots combo in the deck, but the other way is just by keeping up pressure and forcing Davide to make inefficient plays like the double Lightning Bolt on the Autumn Unicorn. So Stonegaze Gorgons is disabling a Foot Soldier, but now the Riptide is going to pull the Foot Soldier away from the effect of the Gorgons. Of course, Jared was going to have the option to stop the Gorgons from disabling the Foot Soldier anyway, because Jared has control of both. But now the Thunderstorm comes down, and that is going to be sufficient to take out the Gorgons, which explains now why Davide cast the Riptide. So if Davide hadn't Riptided that Foot Soldier off the ruins, then if he'd placed the Thunderstorm in that same position, it would have been a 50-50 to hit either the Foot Soldier or the Gorgons. And of course, Davide would much rather take out those Gorgons, so he elected to Riptide the Foot Soldier away, play the Thunderstorm on the Gorgons, get the 100% hit, and then move the Thunderstorm up onto the Geomancer, ready to try and do some more damage next turn. And now that Thunderstorm is in what you'd consider generally a threatening position for the Geomancer player, because if Davide plays a spell and activates it next turn, the Thunderstorm itself can attack, and then it's also threatening the 3 damage shock as well at the end of the turn. So another Stonegaze Gorgons comes down here for Jared, and electing not to put it in a position that, I guess it is a somewhat aggressive position, the Gorgons, because it can attack across onto the ruins, but not placing it in a more central position, placing it off to the side. And that might be trying to spread out Davide's removal, trying to stay out of the range of things like Poison Nova as much as possible with as many minions as possible. Obviously right now, if Davide cast Poison Nova with the Enchantress, it would hit the Gorgons. And being up close, I mean, that is something to think about there, which is things like Poison Nova and now Polymorph, and Davide's list also playing Disintegrate, have this nearby restriction. So by playing the Gorgons up close on the crossroads, although it feels like it's off to the side and it's out of line of some projectile damage, things like Heat Ray, it is not going to be safe from all of those nearby removal spells. So Davide, they're having the Polymorph, turning the Gorgons into a frog, animating the Thunderstorm, attacking for 4. The Foot Soldier here does have a chance to soak up the Thunderstorm, as well as the Thunderstorm is animated, so it itself could get hit by the shock. at the end of the turn, so it's only going to be a 33% chance that the Thunderstorm will hit on Jared. So Davide's rolling here, and I'm guessing 5 is part of the best third option for Davide, so probably a 5 or 6 to hit the Avatar, and indeed it hits the Avatar. So Davide then moves the Thunderstorm across into the void here, so it's going to die? No, he's moving it back because it was animated as a minion, so it will stay a minion until Davide's next turn. And Jared, I think they're pointing out that if Davide moved at the end of turn using the Thunderstorm's ability, moved it across, it would be overlapping square 12, which is a void square, and the Thunderstorm would be banished. So allowing Davide to reverse course there a little bit and put the Thunderstorm back onto solid ground. And Davide also crucially playing out an Angel's Egg there. And that is one of the key cards that Davide used across the tournament to deal with the more aggressive decks that were whittling away at his life total. So the King of the Realm comes down here, which is a huge play, takes control of the Grandmaster Wizard, and the Grandmaster Wizard's holding the Angel's Egg, so Jared does have the opportunity to move the Wizard with the egg and try and get it towards his side of the board. But because the Wizard was so secluded over there in the corner, it actually is not very easy for Jared, even though he now has control of the Wizard, to get it off Davide's sights. So it remains on Davide's sights for another turn cycle here. Davide gains a life at the end of turn, untaps Thunderstorm as well. Thunderstorm's now no longer a minion. And there's a Foot Soldier and a Grandmaster Wizard basically under Jared's control. And both of them are getting +1 power from the King of the Realm currently. We've also got that second Foot Soldier as well that's currently under the Thunderstorm. The little frog not getting a buff from the King of the Realm. So 2 Foot Soldiers that are 2 power, and then the Grandmaster Wizard is 1 power. So really 5 power on Jared's side of the board is quite a lot, plus the King itself. So the Enchantress opts to move across and then play an Atlantean Fate. So that's going to drown the King. It's not going to flood the Bedrock or turn that off because Bedrock is impervious. So Bedrock's ability beats the Atlantean Fate's ability. The Frog gets submerged, the Ruins gets turned off, and Davide opts to animate the Thunderstorm again and attack for 4 again. So we're now in a situation where life totals are even. We've got back to 12-12. And down to 9 at the end of turn, I believe. For Jared? No, down to 6. Okay. So Jared ends up going to 6 after taking the shock from the Thunderstorm. Then we've got Jared tapping here again to play another Bedrock. So potentially setting up for that Roots of Yggdrasil play. 2 Bedrocks, of course, or 3 Bedrocks in play now, are going to give Jared a really massive advantage to break the symmetry of the Roots play. So, of course, when you Roots of Yggdrasil, everything gets destroyed, including your own cards in play. But if you can try and break that symmetry, one way you can break the symmetry is by using the mana on the turn that you use the Roots. One of the difficulties there is getting around the fact you've lost all your threshold, but if you keep things like Bedrock in play, you do keep Earth Threshold, and then Bedrock, of course, helps to break the symmetry even further by remaining in play and giving you a head start on rebuilding your side of the realm. So Jared here with 3 Bedrock, if he can manage to find that Roots of Yggdrasil combo, he's going to be really well placed to outpace Davide on the other side of it, but he is running out of time to find it. I saw a Gigantism, I saw some other pieces in his hand there, as well as this Midland army, which has now come down. So David is going to be wanting to deal with this Midland army as soon as possible. He has a Grandmaster Wizard here to draw 3 spells. And I think he's got 1 mana left after using that Grandmaster Wizard. So the question for David is going to be, can he find a cheap and efficient removal spell? He's still going to be able to cast Polymorph with the Enchantress because he hasn't used the water discount, but his Enchantress is nowhere near close enough to be able to, I suppose he could move across and then polymorph the Midland Army if he wished, but I can't see a polymorph in his hand there. I can see a blink, an Angel's Egg, and a major explosion. And Davide opting to draw a site here. Now, like another floodplain. So the Midland Army is... Jared is going to untap with a Midland Army here, which is not something that happens all that often. Going to be able to bash in, and I think with the Gigantism, Davide goes up to 15. But with the Gigantism and the Foot Soldier, there's at least one Foot Soldier on the board there. Ah, yes, the other one was drowned by the Atlantean Fate. So between the Midland Army, the Foot Soldier, and the Gigantism, that's a lot of damage still that Jared's threatening this turn. The problem is, where's he going to threaten it? So he's trying to potentially bait out the block from the Grandmaster Wizard, doesn't get it. Fair enough. No, he opts to take that back. Yeah, so he's thinking here, I think, about whether to use the Gigantism on the Foot Soldier to have 2 threats. Oh, he's actually got an Earthquake as well, so he can afford to get rid of the blocker here. This might mean, I don't know, how much mana has he got? He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's not going to quite have enough to Earthquake and Gigantism this turn. But he can attack in there for 1 and attack in here for another 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So dealing a total of 9 damage to Davide, putting him from 15 to 6. And really threatening that if Davide doesn't have something good next turn, or isn't able to put Jared to Death's Door, then Jared is definitely threatening the Death's Door in return. So Davide here untaps, and he does have the Major Explosion, which is going to be sufficient if either the Enchantress or the Grandmaster Wizard can get close enough. And really, at this point, the Enchantress can afford to step up into the danger zone, if you like, as long as there's a follow-up. So the Major Explosion is basically 100% to put Jared to Death's Door if the Enchantress just walks forward. Then the Enchantress is probably going to be going to Death's Door next turn herself, and the question is, does Davide have the follow-up to be able to guarantee the kill the following turn? Because in that case, taking that risk is worth it. So a Silence coming down here, which is going to kill the frog that's submerged, because it loses the Submerge ability, but it was under the water. And then the Midland Army has also lost its ability, but that's not a huge problem because it's just going to beat up on Jared anyway. Davide is thinking. So he's thinking whether he wants to attack with the Atlantean Fate using the Silence. So he's played the Silence, killed the frog, he's animated the Atlantean Fate. Does he want to attack with the Atlantean Fate? And he's electing actually here to use the Tor's Hammer Trinket to get that Atlantean Fate up to that crucial 6 damage. 6 power, I should say, so that it does 6 damage when Davide attacks. And they're just asking for a judge ruling confirmation here about whether the Silence is going to take away the Tor's Hammer Trinket buff. And the ruling is that the Tor's Hammer Trinket will apply despite the Silence here, as an additional ability that is applying on top. So it's really the Tor's Hammer Trinket's ability that is then applying once the Silence has removed the existing abilities on the minion. So then a Floodplain comes down on Davide's side, and he has the Major Explosion here for the finish if he wants next turn. It's just about whether he's going to be able to get a Spellcaster into range to guarantee 1 damage on Jared. Davide plays out the second Angel's Egg, potentially trying to still avoid that Death's Door, but that doesn't look likely to happen here. With the amount of power that Jared has on the board and Davide not really having blockers except that one Grandmaster Wizard that isn't even able to defend on the same site as the Midland Army currently is, it looks a pretty forlorn hope for Davide to avoid Death's Door. But from Davide's perspective, I think what he's really doing by playing that Angel's Egg is incentivizing Jared to use all of his minions to attack this turn, so that the Enchantress's path is cleared to be able to move forward and Major Explosion. Now, of course, Davide can target that Site 13 where the Autumn Unicorn is with the Major Explosion that's currently 2 steps away from that Enchantress, and it will still splash onto the Geomancer for the lethal damage. But if the Geomancer finds a way to get a little bit further away, then it could be a little bit harder for Davide to guarantee the kill. But at this stage, all that is going to happen here is the Midland Army is going to try and use its ability. I think the players are discussing whether the silence is animated and whether the silence is therefore silencing itself. So I think perhaps Davide did animate the silence when he played the Tor's Hammer Trinket. And the silence actually has been... So once silence is animated as an aura, it only silences itself, which is the effect of that. And then... So the silence and the Atlantean Fate both getting killed then by the Midland Army. So because the silence was active, it was only affecting itself, silencing its own ability, which then unlocked the Midland Army's ability, and the Midland Army was able to kill the Atlantean Fate and the silence, and the Autumn Unicorn, in combination with a Gigantism, was able to put Davide to Death's Door. So some complicated card interactions, but the players navigating that very deftly. And both players now finding themselves at Death's Door. So Jared doing an excellent job to navigate through the complexities of what was facing him and managed to remove Davide's units and get Davide to Death's Door. And now a Royal Bodyguard gets played down. So I think Davide was looking at the board thinking, you can get me to Death's Door, you can do whatever you like, but at the end of the day, I've got this Major Explosion and that's my trump card. And then all of a sudden, Jared comes out with this Royal Bodyguard, which is just about the only card in the card pool I can think of in that situation, at least in the Earth card pool, that would have stopped Davide from being able to kill Jared with the Major Explosion. So Davide all of a sudden has a head scratcher here. He's got to say, how am I going to get rid of that Royal Bodyguard and play this Major Explosion, which is my finisher? Because I've lost my Philosopher's Stone and I've now only got the 7 mana, which is exactly enough to play the Major Explosion, but not really enough mana to do much else. So is Davide going to find a way to access some more direct damage that's a little bit cheaper than the Major Explosion and also find a removal spell for that Royal Bodyguard? Because that's really what he's got to do. Short of that, the Midland Army... If Davide is not going to be able to kill Jared this turn, he must get rid of that Midland Army, because it's certainly going to be able to finish him off next turn. So a really exciting moment. It looked like it was heading inexorably towards Davide winning because he got Jared to Death's Door first. But then all of a sudden, this Royal Bodyguard just throwing a real spanner in the works and saying, well, you got to come through me first, Davide. So the Enchantress moves up. That's step 1, down to 5 mana. Then the Enchantress blinks forward to be next to the Geomancer, draws a Polymorph, polymorphs the Royal Bodyguard, and then firebolts. So, wowee. So Davide spends 6 of the 7 mana that he had available, needed to draw, it looked like, a removal spell of some kind to take out that Royal Bodyguard, managed to hit the Polymorph off the Blink cantrip, and then was able to finish the game with the Firebolts. What an absolutely outstanding match between two players who played extremely tight, showed a whole lot of skill and some really interesting deck building creativity as well. You can see why those two players were the ones who made it to the final. So well done to Davide and Jared, and an exciting and interesting game between two fantastic decks and two fantastic players. Hope you enjoyed the match, and we'll see you next time on the Contested Realm.